The apartment was quiet, except for the soft hum of the television. Late afternoon sunlight spilled across the living room, catching the edge of a cluttered coffee table stacked with textbooks, empty mugs, and a laptop with stickers peeling at the corners. Alex and Jordan slouched on the worn couch, both staring at the screen as the news anchor's voice cut through the room. Breaking news. Supreme Court decision sparks statewide debate. The ticker ran across the bottom. Alex's eyes were wide, curiosity tinged with anxiety. "Did you see this?" Alex asked, leaning closer. "Gavin Newsom's press conference. He looks really upset." Jordan barely lifted an eyebrow, glancing at the screen. "Upset? Maybe. Politicians always look upset on camera. It's part of the job." But even as Jordan said it, their attention was drawn to the governor on screen, standing behind the podium, speaking quickly, hands raised in frustration. There was no yelling, no screaming, just a clear intensity that radiated through the television. The anchor's voice continued, calm but urgent. "The Supreme Court has issued a decision affecting online privacy rights for minors, and the governor's reaction has sparked conversations across California." Alex leaned back, crossing arms, lips tight. "I can't believe this. If this goes through, it could change everything about how kids use social media." There was a pause, a flicker of doubt in Alex's eyes. "I mean, what if they don't understand the risks? What if it gets out of control?" Jordan shook their head, tapping a finger against the couch arm. "I think he's overreacting. Privacy is important, and teenagers are smarter than we give them credit for. We can't control everything they do online." The words sounded confident, but even Jordan's tone carried a hint of uncertainty. The apartment, with its warm afternoon glow and scattered clutter, seemed to shrink around the two of them, as if the news had compressed the entire world into this small room. On the screen, the anchor explained further. The Supreme Court decision allowed minors more control over their personal data online. Social media platforms would no longer be able to share information without explicit consent from the user, even if that user was under 18. The story was technical, legal, and immediately controversial. Supporters praised it as a step toward protecting personal freedoms, a recognition that young people deserved a voice in how their information was used. Critics warned it could expose children to dangers, including cyberbullying, identity theft, and online predators. Alex ran a hand through their hair, restless. "I just don't know. I feel like Newsom's reaction makes sense in a way. He's worried about safety, and I get that. But it's also about freedom, right?" Jordan nodded slowly. "Yeah, freedom and safety are always at odds. You can't have one without thinking about the other." The tension in the room was not just about politics. It was personal. Alex's younger sister, barely 13, was active online, posting videos, chatting with friends, exploring communities they didn't fully understand. Alex's fear wasn't abstract. Every time their sister received a message from a stranger, Alex's chest tightened. Every notification brought a flicker of anxiety. The Supreme Court decision didn't just feel like a legal ruling. It felt like a direct challenge to the world Alex wanted to protect her from. Jordan, on the other hand, thought about their younger cousin, who had spent hours reading articles, watching tutorials, learning online without anyone restricting them. The cousin had made mistakes, embarrassing ones, awkward ones, but had learned from them. Jordan had seen firsthand how freedom, even with risks, could teach responsibility and critical thinking. "If we wrap kids in bubble wrap," Jordan said quietly, almost to themselves, "they'll never learn how to navigate the real world. Sometimes mistakes are the only teachers we have." The television cut to a split screen, showing Newsom at the podium and a montage of young people using phones, laughing, typing, sharing. His hands moved as he spoke, but it wasn't panic. It was urgency, passion. The way he gestured, leaning slightly forward, his eyebrows drawn, told viewers that he believed this was serious. He wasn't being dramatic for the cameras. He was frustrated because he cared deeply about what could happen. Alex and Jordan both watched silently, feeling a mix of admiration, concern, and frustration. Alex tapped their fingers against the couch, thinking about the broader implications. "It's crazy," they muttered. "This isn't just a law or a policy. This is about how we raise kids in the digital age. How do we teach them responsibility? How do we protect them without taking away their rights?" Jordan shrugged. "I think the court's decision is saying the same thing. Teach them. Don't control them. It's a balance. But it's easier said than done." The anchor shifted to a brief interview with a child psychologist. "Minors benefit from guidance," she said. "But overregulation can hinder development. We want them to make informed choices, to understand consequences, and to develop independence. Decisions like this one give young people an opportunity to grow while still under supervision." The words struck a chord with Alex. Maybe the fear wasn't About losing control. It was about letting go. Jordan leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the screen. I think that's the key. It's not about ignoring danger. It's about teaching kids how to navigate it. If we control everything, they don't learn. If we give them freedom, they might stumble. But they'll also grow. The room was silent for a moment, except for the low hum of the television and the faint sound of traffic outside. Alex's mind raced. Could freedom really coexist with safety? Could parents, lawmakers, and society strike that balance? And could a Supreme Court decision really shift the way everyone approached these questions? Alex finally spoke, voice low. I guess the real debate isn't Newsom yelling or the court making a ruling. It's us. It's how we think, how we decide what's right for kids, for society. And it's messy. There's no simple answer. Jordan nodded, finally relaxing a little. Yeah, messy but real. And that's what makes it important. Outside, the sunlight faded, casting long shadows across the apartment. The news continued, showing clips of teenagers, classrooms, and social media feeds. But for Alex and Jordan, the story had shifted. It wasn't about headlines or political theatrics. It was about life, choices, responsibility, and the fragile, complicated journey of growing up in a world where screens and reality intertwined. The Supreme Court decision had dropped. The news cycle roared, and the governor's frustration flashed across countless screens. But in that small apartment, the real conversation had just begun. Alex and Jordan realized that understanding, listening, and weighing different perspectives mattered more than outrage or agreement. The story was no longer just news. It was a mirror, reflecting the tension, curiosity, and care that every parent, guardian, and young adult had to navigate in a digital age. Even as the night crept in, the conversation lingered. Alex and Jordan stayed on the couch, talking quietly, weighing risks, freedom, safety, and trust. Outside the window, the city carried on, full of people debating, worrying, learning, and growing, just like them. And the TV continued to flicker, a reminder that the world was complex, full of challenges, and that every decision, every perspective mattered. Across town, the cafe buzzed with the low hum of conversation, clinking cups, and the hiss of the espresso machine. Maya stirred her tea, eyes scanning the steam curling above the cup, while Ravi tapped a pen against his notebook, glancing occasionally at the screen of his tablet. Both had been following the news all day, tracking the Supreme Court decision that had set the state on fire. It wasn't just a story about politics or law. It was about the very real impact on young people, the way they used the internet, and how society balanced freedom with safety. Maya leaned back, crossing her arms, her voice calm but firm. This decision is huge, Ravi. Kids finally get more control over their personal information online. They don't have to depend on adults to decide for them every single time. She took a sip of tea, letting the warmth calm her nerves. I've worked in tech for years. I see how platforms exploit data. Giving minors more control is empowering. It teaches responsibility and respects their autonomy. Ravi shook his head, tapping his pen against the table harder. I get that, Maya, but it worries me. Teens aren't always aware of the dangers online. Cyberbullying, predators, scams. They don't think about that until it's too late. Newsom's reaction might seem dramatic on TV, but it's rooted in concern. Safety has to come first. Maya leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, her eyes sharp. Safety is important, yes, but we can't treat minors like they're incapable of making choices. Overprotecting them can backfire. They need the chance to make mistakes in a controlled environment, to learn from experience. That's part of growing up. Ravi exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I'm not saying we shelter them completely. I'm saying freedom without guidance is dangerous. Not every mistake is harmless. Some can have serious long-term consequences. Parents and lawmakers are just trying to prevent harm. Maya nodded, acknowledging the point. I understand that, but this decision doesn't remove guidance. It doesn't ignore danger. It says we should trust young people to make choices while we teach them to be safe. There's a difference between trust and neglect. Ravi paused, considering. Maybe. But the stakes are higher online than in real life. A wrong click or post can spread instantly, can't be erased. Newsom sees this. That's why he's passionate. That's why he's frustrated on camera. He isn't just being emotional. He's reacting to potential consequences that could be serious. Maya smiled faintly. And the Supreme Court is basically saying, yes, we know the risks, but let's balance it with freedom. We have to give young people space to grow, even if it's uncomfortable for adults. Over-control creates dependence, fear, and mistrust. Ravi leaned back, letting the conversation settle for a moment. He looked around the cafe, at parents scrolling on their phones, students typing on laptops, teenagers chatting in small groups. You know, he said slowly. It's not just about the law. It's about how society thinks about young people. If we constantly act like they're fragile or incapable, we rob them of skills they need to survive in the digital world. But if we give them freedom without teaching responsibility, that's risky too. Maya nodded, picking up her cup and swirling the tea thoughtfully. Exactly. It's a balance. That's what Newsom's reaction highlights. It's not black and white. Adults worry because they care. Teens push for independence because they're growing. Both sides have valid concerns. The challenge is finding a middle ground. The conversation shifted as the cafe filled with the clatter of dishes and conversation. Maya and Ravi started talking about real-life examples. I've seen kids take control of their accounts, manage privacy settings, and actually make smart decisions, Maya said. They ask questions, research, talk to friends. They're capable of more than we assume, Ravi countered with a story from his classroom. Last week, a student shared personal information with someone online and got scammed. Lost money, got scared, came to me in tears. How do we justify letting that happen because we want to give freedom? Maya leaned back, voice softening. We guide, we educate, we monitor without controlling. It's not perfect, but that's how learning happens. If we prevent every possible mistake, they never build resilience. Resilience is more important than zero risk. Ravi rubbed his chin, weighing her words. I get the philosophy, I really do. But seeing it in practice, the risk is real. One viral post, one scam, and things spiral fast. Newsom's frustration isn't just political theater. It's rooted in protecting people who might not fully understand consequences. Maya smiled, a little wryly. And the court's decision isn't ignoring that. It's asking us to rethink control, not eliminate safety, just balance it differently. Give guidance, yes, but let young people experience autonomy. Ravi exhaled, shaking his head. I guess it comes down to trust. Do we trust minors to navigate a world full of risk, knowing mistakes will happen? Or do we trust adults to protect them, accepting that it might stunt growth? Maya's eyes softened. It's not about choosing one over the other. It's about dialogue, education, and learning from both mistakes and successes. That's what makes this debate so hard and so important. It's messy, but it's real life. For a moment, they sat in silence, listening to the cafe around them. The world felt alive, full of voices, choices, and opinions. They realized the Supreme Court decision was more than law. It was a reflection of society's struggle to balance freedom, safety, and trust in an increasingly complex digital age. Ravi finally smiled, a reluctant acknowledgement. I still worry, but I see your point. Freedom teaches responsibility, and responsibility comes with guidance. Maybe Newsom's frustration is part of that. He wants guidance, not chaos. Maya nodded. Exactly. Passion and debate aren't bad. They show care. And the court's ruling challenges everyone to think, to balance, to act intentionally. The two friends left the cafe as the sun dipped lower, walking through streets full of people, on their phones, listening to music, sharing videos, learning, interacting. The decision they'd been discussing wasn't just a headline. It was a lens to see how society negotiates complex choices and how ordinary people, parents, teachers, and friends navigate the digital world together. As they parted ways, both thought about the conversations they would continue at home, in classrooms, and online. The story wasn't over. It had just begun. The debate over privacy, freedom, and safety would ripple across families, schools, and communities for months to come. And through it all, the Supreme Court's decision had done exactly what it was meant to do: spark reflection, dialogue, and careful consideration. Even as the city lights flickered on, Maya and Ravi realized the world had shifted slightly. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about thinking, questioning, and understanding that every decision, every choice, had consequences, and that balancing freedom and protection was one of life's most difficult but necessary tasks. The Supreme Court ruling had dropped, Newsom had reacted, the media had reported, and opinions were flying across social media. But for Maya and Ravi, it was deeper than headlines. It was about how society educates, protects, and trusts its youth. And that conversation would continue far beyond the cafe walls, shaping how a generation learned to navigate a world that was complex, fast, and digital. Back in Alex and Jordan's apartment, the evening had settled into a quiet rhythm. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving a warm amber glow from the streetlights that spilled through the blinds. The news was still playing softly on the television, looping clips of Gavin Newsom at the podium and teenagers scrolling phones in classrooms, cafes, and parks. Alex sat cross-legged on the floor, hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee, eyes fixed on the screen. Jordan leaned back on the couch, legs stretched out, arms behind their head. But their mind was clearly elsewhere. Alex finally broke the silence. You know, I keep thinking about my little sister. She's 13, and she's always online. Social media, YouTube, chat groups, everything. I want her to explore, to learn, to connect, but I also worry. What if she gets scammed or bullied? What if someone manipulates her? The words came quickly, a rush of concern spilling out. It wasn't just worry about data or privacy. It was about safety, about the unknown dangers that lurked behind every screen. Jordan sat up slightly, looking at Alex. I get it. But think about my cousin. She's about the same age. She's been exploring online for months, watching tutorials, chatting with friends, even creating content. She's made mistakes, sure, but she's learning. She's learning responsibility, independence. Isn't that part of growing up? Alex sighed, resting their forehead in their hands. I know. I see that. And I want that for my sister too. But mistakes can be serious online. Unlike a scraped knee or a broken vase, the consequences last. Images, messages, scams, they're permanent in ways we didn't have to deal with as kids. I just don't know how to balance freedom and safety. Jordan nodded slowly. Exactly. That's why this Supreme Court decision is such a big deal. It's forcing everyone, parents, lawmakers, society, to think about that balance. Newsom's reaction, the frustration you saw on TV, he isn't just reacting to politics. He's reacting to the weight of that responsibility. He's frustrated because the stakes are real. Alex glanced at the television again. Newsom's hands were raised, but his expression wasn't anger. It was urgency, almost pleading. It was clear he wasn't performing for the cameras. He was communicating concern. That intensity reflected something Alex felt deeply. How adults tried to protect kids while respecting their autonomy. I just feel, Alex started again, voice softening, like we can't always know what's best. Every time I check my sister's notifications or watch what she posts, I see both sides. She's capable, she's smart, she's thoughtful, but she's still a kid. And sometimes, even smart kids make mistakes they don't understand. Jordan leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice gentle but firm. And that's why freedom matters. If we control everything, they never learn. They never understand consequences because they never experience them. Mistakes, even online mistakes, teach lessons that rules and warnings can't. Alex shook their head slightly. But what if the mistakes are big? What if one post ruins her reputation or gets her in serious trouble? It's easy to say mistakes teach lessons, but the internet doesn't forget. The stakes feel higher than anything we dealt with growing up. Jordan paused, letting the point settle. I get it. I really do. But maybe that's the point of the debate. It's not about ignoring risk. It's about managing it, teaching responsibility, guiding, not controlling. The room fell silent for a moment, filled only with the hum of the television. On screen, Newsom was speaking again, highlighting statistics about online abuse, mental health, and safety. But Alex wasn't just hearing facts. They were feeling the emotion, the concern, the deep desire to protect children while respecting their independence. I think, Alex said finally, that's what makes this decision so hard to accept. It's a legal ruling, but it's personal too. It touches families, parents, kids, real lives. It forces us to think about things we've never had to think about before. Jordan nodded. Exactly. And that's why conversations like ours matter. It's not enough to just see the news and react emotionally. We have to talk, reflect, weigh risks and benefits, understand perspectives. That's how we help kids navigate this world safely while giving them space to grow. Alex leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. I guess I'm afraid of letting go. I want to protect her, but I also know I can't. I can't control everything she does online. I can guide, I can educate, I can be there, but I can't prevent every mistake. And that's terrifying, Jordan's expression softened. I know it feels scary, but fear doesn't have to mean control. It can mean preparation, conversation, education. We prepare them for the world, we don't shield them from it entirely. The Supreme Court ruling is just a reflection of that philosophy, teaching kids responsibility instead of forcing rules on them. Alex nodded slowly, thinking about the conversations they had with their sister. The ones where she asked questions about privacy, about apps, about what she could share. The ones where she made decisions on her own, and sometimes stumbled, but always came back asking for advice. Each moment was a lesson, both for the sister and for Alex. And maybe, Alex said after a pause, that's what Newsom is really reacting to too. Not just the decision itself, but the reality that we can't protect everyone perfectly. We try, we legislate, we warn, but ultimately, kids have to navigate some things themselves. Jordan smiled faintly. Exactly. That's why passion matters. Frustration isn't weakness, it's care. And the court isn't ignoring safety. It's challenging society to find balance, to guide thoughtfully, to accept that independence comes with risk. Alex glanced back at the screen. Newsom was no longer gesturing. He was listening now, responding to questions from reporters, still serious but calmer. Alex thought about the teenagers shown in the clips, typing, scrolling, posting, interacting. Each one had the potential to make mistakes, to learn, to grow. And each one deserved guidance, but also respect. I think, Alex said quietly, that the real lesson here isn't about politics or court decisions. It's about life, about teaching responsibility, guiding without controlling, and letting people make choices even when it's scary. Jordan nodded, leaning back. Exactly. And the conversation doesn't end here. It continues at home, in schools, online, in cafes like this one, across communities. We're all part of it, whether we like it or not. The room grew darker as night fully settled in, but Alex and Jordan remained on the couch, lost in thought. Outside, streetlights reflected off cars passing by, and distant voices echoed from neighboring apartments. The television played in the background, a constant reminder of the wider world. Alex finally took a deep breath. I guess the takeaway is this. We can't control everything, and we can't predict every mistake. But we can talk, we can guide, we can teach responsibility. That's the real power we have, and maybe that's what these debates are really about. Finding a balance between protection and freedom, fear and trust. Jordan smiled, a quiet acknowledgement. And maybe the court, Newsom, and all the debates in between are just mirrors, showing us the tension, the responsibility, and the care we need to raise a generation capable of navigating this digital world. The two roommates sat in silence, each reflecting on what they had just discussed. They realized the conversation wasn't about winning or losing, agreeing or disagreeing. It was about understanding, questioning, and preparing for real-life challenges. The Supreme Court decision, the governor's reaction, and the media coverage were just starting points. The real work happened in apartments, classrooms, and homes, where choices were made, mistakes were corrected, and lessons were learned. Even as the night deepened, Alex and Jordan remained engaged in thought, aware that freedom, responsibility, and safety were not simple concepts. They were connected, intertwined, and constantly evolving. And in that quiet apartment, the debate continued, not in headlines, not on social media, but in the minds of people thinking, caring, and learning how to navigate the modern world. Later that evening, Maya and Ravi decided to meet Alex and Jordan for dinner. The small Italian restaurant they chose was cozy, dimly lit, and filled with the quiet chatter of families and friends. The smell of garlic and warm bread filled the air as they settled into a corner booth, drinks in hand. Outside, the city lights glimmered, casting soft reflections across the windows. Despite the casual setting, the four friends quickly fell into a serious conversation. The Supreme Court decision and Newsom's fiery reaction still fresh on everyone's mind. You know, Maya started, swirling her water glass thoughtfully. When I watch Newsom on TV, people say he's losing it. But that's not what I see. I see someone who cares deeply. He's passionate, and yes, he's frustrated. But it's because he feels the weight of responsibility. That's important to recognize. Ravi nodded, leaning back slightly. Exactly. Passion doesn't mean irrationality. It shows concern. And that's what gets lost in headlines. People love drama, but they forget the human side, the care behind the reaction. It's about protecting children while respecting their ability to make decisions. Alex took a sip of coffee. eyes thoughtful. I've been thinking about my sister again. I want her to be safe, but I also want her to learn how to navigate the world on her own. And I guess that's what Newsom's frustration and the court's decision have in common. They're both about trying to strike that balance. Jordan leaned forward, voice calm but earnest. It's the same for us as ordinary people. We can't control every risk, but we can guide, educate, and support. That's what these debates are really about. How society approaches responsibility and freedom. Maya nodded, adding, and the court's ruling isn't saying safety doesn't matter. It's saying protection alone isn't enough. Guidance, education, and respect for autonomy are just as critical. That's the nuance people miss when they read a headline like Newsom loses it. Ravi smiled faintly. It reminds me of teaching in the classroom. Some students need more support, some less. But in the end, they all need space to make choices, to experiment, to sometimes fail. And we're there to help them reflect, learn, and grow. Freedom with guidance, that's the lesson here. Alex leaned back, hands clasped. I guess the media focuses on the spectacle, but the real story is quieter, more personal. It's in homes, classrooms, friendships, and conversations like this one. That's where the decisions matter most, where impact is real. Jordan added, and it's not just about kids. It's about adults too. We have to learn to balance concern with trust, protection with freedom, fear with hope. That's why these debates are messy but necessary. Maya smiled, a little wryly. And messy is okay. Real life is messy. Kids will make mistakes. Adults will make mistakes. Platforms will make mistakes. But every decision, every discussion is part of learning how to navigate the digital world responsibly. Ravi leaned in, voice lower, more reflective. I've realized something today. Newsom, the court, the headlines, they're catalysts. They push people to think, to question, to engage. The real impact happens here, in dialogue, in reflection, in careful decision-making. It's human, not political. Alex nodded slowly, thinking about the day's events, the conversations in the cafe, and the quiet hours spent worrying about a sibling. It's true. We talk about the court. We talk about the governor. But the real lessons happen when we reflect on our own roles. How do we guide? How do we support? How do we trust? Jordan chuckled softly. And sometimes the best guidance is simply listening, asking questions, and allowing space. The court's decision and Newsom's reaction aren't endpoints. They're conversation starters. They're reminders that balancing freedom and safety is ongoing, evolving, and personal. Maya gestured toward her friends. And conversations like this, friends discussing, sharing perspectives, acknowledging fear and hope, that's how society improves. That's how young people learn responsibility without feeling trapped or helpless. That's how we respect autonomy while remaining vigilant. Ravi added, it also shows that frustration and passion are valuable, not just for leaders, but for all of us. Caring enough to speak out, to question, to guide, even when it's uncomfortable, is part of responsible citizenship. It's messy, but it's necessary. Alex smiled faintly. I guess the takeaway is that no single decision, no single reaction can solve everything. It's about the ongoing dialogue, the reflection, the awareness. Newsom may have been frustrated. The court may have made a bold ruling, but the real work is here, where we live, learn, and guide. Jordan nodded. Exactly. And the more perspectives we hear, the better. There's value in disagreement, in questioning, in pausing before reacting. It's what keeps decisions thoughtful, measured, and humane. The four friends sat in silence for a moment, letting the words sink in. The world outside the window continued at its steady pace. Cars driving past, people walking home, lights flickering. The Supreme Court ruling, the media coverage, and the governor's passionate response had created waves, but the ripples reached into homes, conversations, and personal reflection. Maya broke the silence. I think that's why these stories capture attention. It's human. It's relatable. It's about responsibility, care, and choice. We see the debate, but we also see ourselves navigating similar challenges every day. Ravi nodded. And that's why it's important to stay thoughtful, to question assumptions, to balance emotion with reason. The headlines are just starting points. The meaningful work happens in how we respond, reflect, and guide others. Alex leaned back, looking at each of their friends. I feel like today has been a reminder. Freedom, responsibility, safety, guidance, they're all interconnected. None of us have perfect answers, but we can approach decisions with care, dialogue, and empathy. Jordan smiled, and maybe that's the most important lesson. The debate isn't about winners or losers. It's about understanding perspectives, acknowledging fears, and striving to do better. For ourselves, for young people, for society. The restaurant began to quiet as the night deepened. Waiters moved slowly, families finished their meals, and soft music played in the background. The four friends finished their drinks, reflecting on the day, the news, and their own roles in guiding and learning. The Supreme Court ruling and Newsom's reaction had been dramatic in the public eye, but for them, the real story was quieter, slower, and far more meaningful. Maya spoke again, softly. At the end of the day, it's about people. How we communicate, how we guide, how we trust. That's where change actually happens. Not in headlines, not in sound bites, but in thoughtful action, reflection, and conversation. Ravi nodded. Exactly. Passion is good. Debate is good. But reflection and dialogue are even better. That's what shapes responsible behavior, meaningful guidance, and a society that respects both freedom and safety. Alex and Jordan exchanged a glance, a quiet understanding passing between them. They had argued, worried, reflected, and learned. And through it all, they realized that the Supreme Court decision and Newsom's reaction weren't just political events. They were mirrors. Mirrors showing how society wrestles with responsibility, trust, freedom, and care. As they stepped out into the night, city lights flickering around them, the friends felt a sense of clarity. The conversation didn't end at the restaurant. It would continue at home, online, in classrooms, and across communities. They understood that balancing freedom and safety was not a single act. It was an ongoing journey, shaped by reflection, dialogue, and human empathy. The Supreme Court had ruled. Newsom had reacted. The media had reported. But for these four friends, the real story was the discussion, the understanding, and the reflection. That's where lessons were learned, where responsibility was understood, and where freedom was respected without ignoring risk. And as they walked through the quiet streets, they knew that every conversation, every decision, and every act of guidance mattered. Life was messy, complex, and sometimes uncertain. But it was also full of opportunity for growth, understanding, and connection. And in that balance, in that ongoing dialogue, lay the real meaning of freedom, responsibility, and care.